Hi, my name is Kenneth Nelson, and I'm a professor of sociology at the Swedish Institute for Social Research at Stockholm University. So before I begin my presentation, I would like to take the opportunity and thank the organizers of this e-seminar and the Korea Legislation Research Institute for inviting us to present our research. And I really feel honored by your interest in our book. I will focus on the results that we present in the book. But before I do that, I would like to recapitulate what we actually look for in our data. As Simon already have mentioned, we believe that it's fruitful to make a distinction between unbalanced and balanced generational welfare contracts. Unbalanced contracts are characterized by an uneven distribution of social citizenship rights across age-related risk categories. So on the horizontal axis, we have divided human life into three phases characterized by the different age-related social risks that we identify in the book. So childhood, working age, and old age. On the vertical axis, we have a hypothetical measure showing the extensiveness of social citizenship rights for those risks. So discussions about generational conflict and distributional trade-offs in social policy making are most often assumed to follow the profile described by the pro-old subtype, where aging welfare state become increasingly supportive of the elderly. In the book, we not only introduce a fourth ideal typical profile, the balanced generational welfare contract, but we also illustrate a scenario where the volume of resources available for redistribution is far from predetermined, but instead varies according to the overall design of the system. And we are particularly interested in to test two hypotheses or ideas. First, we expect that the generational structure of social citizenship is closely tied to the extensiveness of public commitments in areas of social policy. So the balanced contract is thus believed to maximize protection for all citizens, irrespective of age, and thus increase the overall social ambition of the welfare state. The reduced likelihood of generational trade-offs in the presence of such balanced welfare contracts suggests that more developed social citizenship rights for one particular age group do not necessarily imply weak protection for other age-related risks. So instead of fueling conflicting claims and social divisions across generations, balanced generational welfare contracts are expected to encourage coalition formation between age groups of relevance for the sharing of risks and resources in society, as well as for social equality and justice. So in order to test these hypotheses, we need not only good quality data, but also appropriate data for the questions at hand. And there is a long-standing and ongoing discussion in research on how to best conceptualize and measure welfare states and social policy. And I don't really have time to review this debate in closer detail, more than to note that almost all studies on population aging in welfare states use social expenditure. And there's one major problem with social expenditures. They are strongly related to changes in social need. So as the population ages, pension expenditure increases. As unemployment rises, so that does expenditure on out-of-work benefits and so forth. While social policy as such may have not changed. So this close relationship between social expenditures and social need pretty much explains why research is preoccupied by discussing scenarios similar to the old age contract, where the elderly sort of are supposed to reap the fruits of the welfare state at the expense of younger generations. Instead of social expenditures, we use data on social rights, focusing on the degree of income replacement in major social insurance programs. So instead of asking how much countries spend on various types of social policies, we ask how well protected citizens are against their particular age-related social risks. And we believe that the latter probably matters more for people than how expenditures are allocated into different cost categories. So by using social rights, we are able to go beyond the typical scenario of zero-sum distributional trade-offs and reveal patterns of positive sum solutions in policymaking. So our data on social citizenship rights are from the SPIN database at Stockholm University. The SPIN database includes quantitative information on income replacement, coverage, and financing of a large number of social policy programs. And the database includes 37 countries, and for some variables, information goes back to the early 1930s. So in the book, we analyze 18 long-standing OECD countries from the 1960s and onwards. These 18 countries are similar in many respects to allow meaningful comparisons, but they are different in terms of the organization of social policy and social inequality. One important aspect is that they are all stable democracies and have been democratized for a very long time. They have also reached similar levels of economic development. So, considering our first hypothesis, does the generational welfare contract encourage positive sum solutions in policymaking? So these are the generational welfare contracts observed in our data. We could not find a country that for an extended period of time have a contract of the pro-child subtype. For individual years, some countries do come close to such a contract. And Sweden is one example, but only for the most recent years. So on the vertical axis, we show the degree of income replacement in age-related social insurance. And entitlements are calculated net of taxes and expressed as percentages of an average production worker's net wage. On the horizontal axis, we have the three major age-related social risks that we identify in the book. So for childhood-related risks, we take into account the benefit package including child allowances, child tax allowances, child tax credits, postnatal parental leave benefits, and maternity grants paid in relation to childbirth. For working age risks, we focus on unemployment and sickness benefits, while for the elderly, we include old age pensions. So in short, our data shows that greater balance in the generational structure of social citizenship seems to improve the overall comprehensiveness of the system, as well as levels of income replacement in social insurance for each separate age-related social risk. We thus believe that this supports our hypothesis of positive sum solutions in generational politics. It is important to note that no age-related risk group are better off in the context of an unbalanced contract, not the elderly in pro-old countries, nor those of working age in pro-work countries. Throughout the book, we combine descriptive analysis with more sophisticated statistical techniques. And for this particular analysis on positive sum solutions in the generational structure of social citizenship, we use fixed effect statistical regression. But first, we had to construct two variables capturing the generational welfare contract. So balance of income replacement in age-related social insurance show the extent to which social citizenship rights differ between the three age-related risk categories. And here we use the inverted coefficient of variation. So a higher value shows a lower dispersion of social citizenship across age-related risk categories, and that the generational welfare contract is balanced. Low values show that the income replacement in social insurance is more unevenly distributed between the three age-related risk categories, and that the generational welfare contract is unbalanced. The other variable is simply the overall level of social citizenship, defined as the arithmetic mean of income replacement in social insurance for our age-related social risks. So we do not only find a positive association between balance and the overall level of income replacement in age-related social insurance, but also a positive association between balance and levels of income replacement for each specific age-related risk category. And we believe that these results provide strong evidence in favor of the existence of positive sum solutions in generational politics, where each age group tend to be better off in countries with balanced contracts. Considering the second hypothesis or question, do more extensive citizenship rights and the balanced contract contribute positively to various outcomes that we have reason to value? We do a number of different analyses divided into several of the chapters in the book. And this particular one is on poverty. And we can see that the institutional structures shaping generational welfare contracts are to a large extent mirrored in poverty statistics. For each age-related social risk, poverty is lower in countries with balanced generational welfare contracts. Note that the difference in poverty between the age-related risk categories are also reduced in the balanced countries. So age-related inequalities are therefore lower in these particular welfare states. In the regression analysis, we specify this relationship and show that age-related imbalances in social insurance exert downward pressure on levels of income replacement, with high poverty rates as a consequence, both in the total population and in each age-related risk category. The latter is not shown on this slide, but the figure is in the book. The structural equation models that we estimate clearly show that there is no direct link between the age-related distribution of social citizenship and poverty, which is in accordance with our positive sum solution hypothesis. Instead of a direct effect, the influence is mediated by the degree of income replacement in age-related social insurance, which is higher the more generationally balanced the welfare contract is. So in the book, we also analyze subjective well-being in the form of life satisfaction and happiness. And we observe similar patterns as for poverty. Both life satisfaction and happiness are higher in countries with balanced contracts, and the difference between age-related risk categories are lower. And the latter is easily observed in the multivariate regressions. Here we used subjective well-being as a dependent variable at the individual level, which are nested in countries at level 2. Besides the age-related risk categories, we also included sex, educational attainment, and family type at the individual level. And people of working age without children is the reference category for the age-related risk groups in this analysis. So at the country level, we included GDP per capita and the dummy indicating whether the data is from the World of Values study. For most countries, we use data from the European Social Survey. And differences between the World Values Survey and the European Social Survey are expected to be picked up by this gamma variable. At country level, we also included our measure on the overall income replacement in age-related social insurance. So we can easily see that families with children or people in the childhood risk category are less satisfied with life than childless people of working age. For happiness, we did not observe a significant difference for this particular risk category. However, elderly people are both more satisfied with life and more happy than childless people of working age. So we therefore included an interaction between the old age risk category at the individual level and the overall level of income replacement at country level. And, and this interaction is negative, which needs to be interpreted in relation to its main effects, and particularly the positive influence of the old age risk category. And the negative interaction shows that the difference in subjective well-being between the elderly and childless people of working age is lower in countries with more extensive age-related social citizenship rights. And we may then conclude that the balanced generational welfare contract with its more extensive social citizenship rights reduce the age-related gradient of subjective well-being. For social and political trust, we observe similar patterns. People are more trustworthy of their fellow citizens and of the state in countries with balanced generational welfare contracts, and differences in political trust, at least, between age-related risk groups are also smaller in countries with balanced generational welfare contracts. And also here we run a series of multi-level regressions. But for trust, we only find a significant association for political trust, where elderly people have higher trust in the state than childless people of working age. So once again, we find a negative interaction between elderly people and the overall level of income replacement in age-related social insurance, showing that the age-related gradient of political trust is reduced in countries with more extensive social citizenship rights. That is, countries that tend to have a more balanced generational welfare contract. And these high levels of trust and low differences across age-related risk groups, we believe is quite important for the sustainability of welfare state and the creation of a just, a stable society. We also analyze the labor market in these 18 OECD countries, and the reason why we do that is that it's probably not far from the truth to say that the effectiveness of welfare state to reduce social inequalities more broadly depends on how well labor markets perform. The combination of well-functioning labor markets and effective redistribution also plays a central role for the possibility of positive solutions in generational politics. So our balanced generational welfare contracts, with their high levels of income replacement and age-related social insurance related to adverse employment outcomes, or can greater balance in the generational structure of social citizenship be regarded as an important social investment that improves labor market performance. In short, we do not find any adverse labor market impacts of balanced generational welfare contracts. If anything, countries with balanced generational welfare contracts tend to have had higher labor force participation rates, particularly among women. In the book, we show that this is pretty much related to the expansion of paid parental leave and income replacement for childhood-related risks in these particular countries. And for unemployment, we find no clear association with the general welfare contract at all. So finally, in the book, we address the political determinants of the generational welfare contracts. So basically, we ask when political actors are more likely to engage in mutual cooperation and positive solutions in social policymaking for the benefit of all age groups. And we show that the relative strength of left political parties is particularly important, and that the likelihood of interest mediation in generational politics is greater in contexts where governments more readily intervene in market processes and age-related claims are embedded in class politics. This is particularly true for the latter period, where greater balance in age-related social insurance largely was driven by an expansion of family policy and income replacement to childhood-related risks. So these are basically the overall results that we present in the book. Of course, in the book, we provide much more details. We go into the developments over time and more in depth. And we also look at each individual country and how social policy and the generational welfare contract have developed over the years. But for the overall results, I pretty much covered everything in this presentation. But before I finish, I think it's time to say something about the main conclusions. So these are essentially the main conclusions that we draw in the book. And we believe that positive solutions in generational politics are more likely to be supported by the balance contract. Social citizenship rights that are generationally balanced and provide more evenly distributed protection across different stages of life are to the advantage of all citizens. The balanced generational welfare contract is not only associated with the increased welfare of all citizens, but inequalities are also reduced, and then also justice is increased. Generational trade-offs in policymaking can thereby be reduced or even avoided, leading to more just and equal societies. So I think that these are our main conclusions in a nutshell. And by this, I also finish my presentation. And once again, thanks for your interest in our book and for inviting us to have this video presentation. So bye for now. Hi. Thanks again for inviting us to present our book on the generational welfare contracts. And we also appreciate the possibility to respond to some of your questions and comments. I will respond to the questions and comments raised in the first and the third section, and Simon will respond to the questions in the second and fourth section. Okay, so let us start with the comments or questions in the first section. And the first question, I think perhaps we didn't describe or illustrations of the generational welfare contracts clearly enough. So essentially, it's quite simple. So on the horizontal axis, we have simply the human life phase. So, and we have divided that human lifespan, we have divided it into 3 age-related risk categories. So in each of these illustrations of a generational welfare contract, on the horizontal axis towards the left, we have childhood-related risks. In the middle of the horizontal axis, we have working age related risks. And towards the end of the horizontal axis, we have old age risks. And this applies to the balanced generational welfare contract, but it also is applied to the illustration of, for example, the pro-child contract. So let us look at the first illustration of the pro-child contract. Towards the left of the horizontal axis, for this contract, we have childhood-related risks. Towards the end of the horizontal axis of this contract, we have old age risks. And in the middle of the horizontal axis, for this pro-child contract, we have working age related risks. So it applies to each of these generational welfare contracts. So in a scenario where the welfare state or social protection is equally generous towards all of these 3 age-related social risks, if we graphically would illustrate a scenario like that, it will take the shape of a rectangle. But if it is the case that there is 1 or 2 groups that are provided less protection compared to a third group, and we would illustrate that, it will take the form of a triangle. So this is the way we try to illustrate the difference between these generational welfare contracts. There is one thing here that we would like to mention. When we look at the translated version of our book, it seems to us as if the size of these illustrations are the same for the unbalanced and the balanced contract. But in the original version of the book, it's actually the case that the balanced generational welfare contract reaches further up the vertical axis than the other contracts. And this is important because it basically, here we try to illustrate one of our basic expectations of the book, that we believe that each age-related risk group or risk category are better off in the balanced contract. So it should, for each age-related social risk, it should reach further up the vertical axis than the unbalanced contracts. So if this is not the case, in the translated version of the book, we advise you to make a note in the margin that the size of the balanced generational welfare contract should be a bit bigger than the unbalanced contract to illustrate these expectations. And of course, in the rest of the chapters in the book, we illustrate that empirically we do indeed seem to find exactly this. In the first set of comments and questions, there were also another issue. And to us, it seemed to be the case that you think that, or that our book may give the impression that the virtues of the balanced generational welfare contract is strongly related to the Nordic welfare states, which we all know are very big and very generous. To some extent, we of course agree, but we still believe that we provide some genuine findings. It should be noted that we are not only observing balanced generational welfare contracts in the Nordic countries, but also in Austria, Belgium, and France. And these three continental European countries have quite different social security systems compared to the Nordic countries. It is thus not only about the overall size of the welfare state in the Nordic countries or something similar. We would also like to raise, again, like we do in the book, that welfare states are very complex entities that are structured by a multitude of factors. And we raised this issue, I think, in the introduction to the book. But it is therefore difficult to exactly disentangle cause and effect, especially in quantitative analysis. So in the book, we therefore discuss how the generational structure of the welfare state is related to issues of social class and gender. And for example, this is one reason why we actually devote a chapter towards the end of the book on the political determinants. We also would like to note that we not only analyze how balanced generational welfare contracts reduce poverty, increase trust, and boost subjective well-being. We also analyze differences in these outcomes across age-related social risk groups. And thus we tap into the issue of intergenerational equality. And all this together, we believe, provide some evidence that a balanced generational welfare contracts have produced many outcomes that we have from a justice perspective have reason to value, and that it is not only related to social security and social protection in Nordic countries. In the third section, there was only one comment, and it was about the differential tax treatment of employment and pension income in Sweden, and you wanted some more information about that. So it's basically the liberal and conservative government introduced an earned income tax credit in 2007, which were expanded in the following years up until 2011. It is important to know that this earned income tax credit only applies to employment income, not income from the social security system or old age pensions. So in effect, elderly persons have a high tax rate on their pension income compared to those with work income. And this raised some concern among pensioner organizations in Sweden, and it was generally assumed to be a system that was unfair. So the social democratic government that came into force in 2014, they have successively reduced this differential tax treatment by lowering the tax levied on pension income. And today, there is hardly any difference in the tax treatment of pensions and work income in Sweden. So this was basically what I had. So now in the second video, Simon will respond to the questions and comments you had in the second section and in the fourth section. So that is all from me. So goodbye and Merry Christmas and all that. And thanks again for inviting us to present our results.